$720,000, she shrieked, like a smoke alarm at a barbecue. Then she slapped a screaming red violation notice on her oak door using Hello Kitty duct tape as if Satan himself subcontracted her HOA duties. The paper flapped in the wind like it was ashamed to be part of this circus, while Brittany Underwood, our local HOA president and part-time pastel dictator, sat smugly in her golf cart like a suburban warlord. She gripped her clipboard like a holy relic, her smile so fake it could curdle oat milk. I stood frozen. Grandpa? He sipped his sweet tea and muttered, "Good. Let's see how long they last before imploding from their own stupidity." "You think that was the end? Oh, sweet summer child. That was just the appetizer, because the moment Grandpa cracked open that attic chest and unearthed documents older than HOA itself, the real fireworks began. The eviction notice was screaming red, taped crookedly to our old oak door like a drunk traffic cop had a grudge against wood. It flapped in the wind like a dying bird, and I swear I could hear it whisper, "You're screwed," in big, juicy numbers at the top, $720,000, 0 cents. I blinked, then blinked again like maybe a zero would fall off if I stared hard enough. It didn't. The number was real, so was the smirk on Brittany Underwood's face. There she was, HOA president, clipboard queen, and local tyrant in khaki, parked smugly in her golf cart like a suburban warlord. She had her usual uniform on, pastel polo, visor angled with military precision, and a smile that could curdle almond milk. "You have 30 days, she said, like she was doing us a damn favor and not, threatening financial annihilation. I stood on the porch frozen, mouth open, brain buffering. My grandpa, my actual real-life grandpa, just sipped his sweet tea like we've gotten a coupon in the mail. "They're going to wish they brought lawyers, not lawn chairs," he muttered without even looking up. The man sounded like Clint Eastwood in retirement. I could barely breathe. My brain was spiraling through every number I'd ever known. $720,000, 0 cents? That was more than our house was worth. More than 10 of our houses. It was cartoon villain money. I stepped off the porch like I was moving through molasses, grabbed the notice, and started reading the laundry list of violations. Unauthorized dock, illegal boat shed, flamingo figurines deemed excessive. And here's the kicker. Every fine backdated to the 1,950 S's. That's right. Apparently we owed money for a mailbox that existed before color television. HOA logic. If it existed before we were born, still your fault. "This can't be legal," I whispered, voice shaky. Grandpa finally looked up from his tea. "Of course it's not. That's what's going to make it fun." That's the thing about my grandpa. You think he's harmless. White beard, old flannel shirts, smells like cedar and motor oil. But underneath all that is a man who once outfished a game warden during a storm and then invited him in for brisket. You don't out crazy grandpa, you just try to survive him. Meanwhile, Brittany and her brigade of HOA volunteers, every one of them wearing khaki like it was part of a secret uniform, started prowling around the yard with tape measures and clipboards. One guy measured our dock like he was checking for radioactive leaks. Another lady poked at our shutters like she expected them to confess to war crimes. I kid you not, someone took photos of the bird bath. "This is insane," I muttered. "They're inspecting us like we're a crime scene." Grandpa rocked back in his chair, totally unbothered. "They are building their case," he said, eyes still on the lake. "Let him. We've got something better than lawn ornaments." He tapped his temple. "History." And that's when I realized this wasn't just harassment. This was war. The kind fought in courtrooms and on porches, a turf war with rulers and bylaws instead of bullets, a battle between freedom and HOA spreadsheets. And guess what? We were on the front line. Grandpa reached for a second glass of tea and handed it to me like he was knighting me into combat. "Drink up, kiddo. You're going to need it." I took a sip and stared at the notice again. $720,000, 0 cents. I was pretty sure that was what dragons hoarded. And yet here it was, stapled to our door by someone who thought lawn flamingos were a threat to civilization. You think this is the part where we lawyer up and beg? Oh, no. You think this story ends with Brittany winning? Sweet summer child, this is just the opening slap. The real fun hadn't even started. Let the HOA dance begin. By noon the next day, Our property looked like it had been invaded by a small army of suburban commandos. Brittany Underwood had returned, of course she had, perched in her golf cart like some pastel-colored Caesar, flanked by her loyal troops in matching khaki shorts and orthopedic sneakers. Each one clutched a clipboard like it was a weapon. They didn't knock, they didn't speak, they just descended. The guy with the yardstick started remeasuring the dock we had had since the Eisenhower administration, while a woman with a laminated color wheel compared our shutters to paint samples like she was solving a murder. Someone pointed at the mailbox. Another one took a photo of the flamingo, not the illegal flamingo, mind you, just Grandpa's favorite one, the one with the old aviator sunglasses and a dent from a squirrel fight in '98. That flamingo's been through more than Brittany ever has, Grandpa mumbled, and he's still standing tall. The official list of violations grew faster than an HOA rumor chain. Apparently, our mailbox was too whimsical. Our shutters were non-regulation taupe. The dock was half an inch too long. The flower beds created visual imbalance. Even the bench by the lake, which Grandpa built in 1963 with his bare hands and one good thumb, was cited for unauthorized lakeside furniture. The flamingo, unapproved lawn art with facial accessories. You couldn't make this up. It was like being mugged by Martha Stewart's angry cousins. I watched them move through our property like ants on a mission, and every instinct in me screamed to yell, to push back, to grab that flamingo and go full Braveheart. But Grandpa didn't flinch. He just watched from the porch, sipping his tea like it was the Super Bowl, and he already knew the final score. "They're not inspecting, kiddo," he said, adjusting his chair just slightly to face the lake. "They're puffing up their chests. The thing is, people who puff up the most tend to pop the fastest." I muttered something about HOE fascism and how if they find us for having a pulse, I wouldn't be surprised. Grandpa just chuckled and leaned forward a little, elbow on his knee. "Back when I built this house, the only thing patrolling this land were mosquitoes the size of thumbs. No golf carts, no clipboards. Just trees, water, and freedom." He patted the porch like it was a loyal dog. "They didn't build this community around us. They built around us. This house didn't join them. It preceded them." There was something quietly terrifying about the way he said that. Not angry, just matter of fact. The kind of tone you use when you're about to ruin someone's week with a smile. Brittany didn't seem to hear that tone, though. She was too busy directing traffic, barking about fence height discrepancies and how our wind chimes exceeded decibel levels during community quiet hours. I counted 3 separate people measuring the distance between the porch steps and the sidewalk. One even pulled out a level. And all the while, Grandpa sat like a king on his rocky throne, letting them scribble their citations and take their pictures. The more I looked at him, the more I realized something important. He wasn't just calm, he was entertained. There was something brewing behind those eyes, something older and sharper than any HOA handbook. That's when he leaned toward me, voice low, smooth like bourbon. "Let 'em walk around like they own the place," he said. "They don't even know what ground they're standing on." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He grinned, not his usual warm grandpa grin, but the other one, the predator grin, the one he used when he beat the city council in '97 over a dock permit using nothing but a Polaroid and a town charter. And then he said the line I still hear in my sleep. "They don't know it yet, kiddo, but they're stomping across a minefield, and I bury the damn things myself." And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The attic in our house wasn't so much a storage space as it was a graveyard of forgotten crap. Grandpa had pointed a crooked finger toward the ceiling after dinner and said, "There's a cedar chest up there. Looks like it belongs in a pirate movie. Go fetch it." No further explanation, no dramatic music, just that lazy glint in his eye that said, "You're about to find something that'll blow the khakis off those clipboard zealots." So I grabbed a flashlight, tugged the rickety ladder down, and climbed into the dust-riddled gloom like I was entering a tomb. In many ways, I was. The air smelled like cedar, mold, and ghosts. Boxes teetered like they were one breeze away from filing a workers' comp claim. I passed a broken vacuum cleaner from the ADS, an unidentifiable metal sculpture, possibly art, possibly a rusted death trap, and what I hoped was a stuffed raccoon, but might have been a fur hat with teeth. I was halfway to giving up when the flashlight beam landed on a dark wooden chest wedged behind a stack of old yearbooks and a rocking horse that looked like it'd seen combat. It was heavy, real heavy, the kind of heavy that makes you question your life choices as you drag it across the floorboards with every muscle screaming. Then the attic creaked. loudly, the kind of creak that makes you freeze mid-breath and reevaluate whether this was a heroic quest or your obituary's first paragraph. I glanced down through the narrow hatch and, for a hot second, imagined my foot punching through the ceiling and landing in Grandpa's soup. Would have made dinner more interesting, I guess. When I finally wrestled the chest down the ladder, one careful step at a time, muttering threats under my breath, I half expected Grandpa to be asleep, but he was waiting by the table, sipping tea like nothing on earth could surprise him. "Found it," I wheezed, setting the chest down with a thud that echoed like a war drum. He opened it with reverence, almost like opening a family Bible. Inside, brittle documents. Blueprints, yellowed letters, and folders stamped with seals so old they looked like they belonged in a museum next to dinosaur bones. One envelope was sealed with wax, actual wax, as in 1920 S. Governor Seal wax. Grandpa cracked it open and unfurled a document like he was holding a map to buried treasure. "What is this?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He just let the paper lie there under the lamp. State land grants, original deed filings, exemptions from zoning boards, waterway rights, and most importantly, any future civic association jurisdiction, signed, sealed, bulletproof. The HOA had built their petty kingdom around us, but the foundation, that still belonged to Grandpa. He finally looked at me, a smirk twitching on his weathered face. "That HOA's about to learn the difference between rules and law." I leaned in, heart pounding, hands itching to slap these papers onto Brittany Underwood's smug clipboard. But Grandpa stopped me with a raised finger. "Not yet. Timing, kiddo. Let them stack their fake citations. We'll drop this when the pile's nice and high. The higher it is, the louder it crashes." For a second, I was speechless. This wasn't just a counterattack. This was premeditated cold brew revenge. He'd had these papers for decades, just waiting. I stared at him like he was some kind of legal warlock. "You kept all this? Why?" He shrugged. "'Cause I knew one day someone in khakis would get ideas." And just like that, the fear started to melt away. Not entirely, but enough to smile. Grandpa patted the folder like it was a loaded shotgun. "Let's see how they play HOA law," he said, "when we've got state history on our side." The next morning, Grandpa dressed like he was going to a fishing tournament held in a courtroom. Worn flannel, tucked into clean jeans, a belt buckle that looked like it could double as a weapon, and that old sweat-stained cap with Vietnam vet still kicking, barely legible across the front. We loaded the satchel into the truck like it was carrying nuclear codes and headed into town, bumping along the road with the sort of calm that only comes when a man knows he's holding a royal flush and everyone else is playing Go Fish. We pulled up to a one-story building wedged between a taxidermy shop and a nail salon called Claw and Order. The sign above the door read, "Hal Dempsey, Attorney at Law," in letters so faded they looked like they'd given up years ago. Inside smelled like paper, pipe smoke, and just a hint of bourbon. Mr. Hal Dempsey shuffled out from behind a stack of dusty case files like an ancient owl in human form, suspenders sagging, glasses thick as soda bottles, and a mustache that looked older than the Constitution. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, adjusting his spectacles as Grandpa handed him the leather folder. "Didn't think I'd see this thing again before I croaked." He flipped through the documents like a man reunited with an old war buddy. Steve grins. "Pre-hole exempt causes? Hellfire, this is bulletproof, solid as bedrock." He looked up, eyes twinkling behind those Coke bottle lenses. "You boys are sitting on the legal equivalent of a dragon horde. HOA's got as much jurisdiction here as a lemonade stand at the Pentagon." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Grandpa just leaned back in his chair, arms folded like a man watching the first clouds of a storm. He ordered himself. "So, what do we do?" I asked, already imagining Brittany's face when we slapped those papers down like a Uno reverse card made of state law. But Grandpa just shook his head. "Not yet." Dempsey raised an eyebrow. "Let 'em pile higher, huh?" "Exactly," Grandpa said, with the same calm you'd use to describe setting a mousetrap and waiting for the squeak. "We don't stop 'em from digging. We just make sure the hole's deep enough when it finally swallows 'em whole." Mr. Dempsey chuckled, the kind of dry lawyer laugh that sounded like it had been practiced in courtrooms and back rooms since the 1960s. "Then I'll keep this safe," he said, tapping the folder like it was a sleeping grenade. And when it's time, we'll drop it so hard the HOA charter rips in half. We left the office lighter than we walked in. Grandpa whistled all the way back to the truck, the satchel tucked back under his arm like it was an old friend. But when we turned onto our street, the whistling stopped. The HOA had doubled down. Bright orange violation notices were staked into our lawn like some kind of bureaucratic crop circle. There were new ones taped to the mailbox, the fence, even the damn flamingo's beak. Brittany was out front again, barking orders into her phone, looking like Napoleon in a tennis skirt. Grandpa didn't say a word. He just watched, then gave a little nod like everything was going exactly as planned, because it was. You thought he'd march out right then, drop the documents like a mic, and blow up their HOA circus? Please. You think Grandpa plays for applause? No, he plays for claps, and he was going to let every single one of them dance straight into the trap he built with cedar and state seals. 2 days later, we came back from the grocery store to find our own driveway barricaded, like we were housing fugitives. A half dozen orange traffic cones blocked the entrance. Along Vuomo Tambien, 2 dungbang Sharpie do choi excess restricted ocho choo choo or tied to 2 folding chairs like some sad dystopian art project. Standing next to it like she'd just won a war was Brittany Underwood, arms crossed, chin up, clipboard held like a sword. "Mr. Delaney," she called out, loud enough for birds to take flight. "Your property is under temporary restriction until all outstanding compliance matters are addressed." Grandpa didn't even slow the truck down. He rolled to a crawl, blinked twice at the sign, then whispered, "Oh, someone's been busy." And then, without a word, he threw the truck into reverse so slowly it made time hurt, letting the rusty exhaust pipe cough like a dying dragon. The HOA queen glared at like we'd just insulted her lawn ornaments. We parked down the street and hauled our groceries in like exiles, passing neighbors peeking through blinds like they were watching a hostage standoff. The fear of the HOA was thick in the air, tighter than the cling wrap on Brittany's face-lifted authority. Inside, Grandpa unpacked eggs and cans of chili like nothing happened. I, meanwhile, was about ready to dig a tunnel under the porch like some kind of anti-Karen resistance mole. Then the real siege began. Every day, a new violation notice, printed in bold font, laminated like Holy Scripture and taped somewhere increasingly absurd. Monday, unsanctioned bird feeders, potential threat to migratory pattern. Tuesday, improper holiday-like color, inappropriate for seasonal guidelines. It was August. Wednesday, unregistered canoe found, creates tonal discord during quiet hours. Grandpa didn't bat an eye. He took each one, read it like a wine label, and slapped it onto the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cow in a sombrero. The door was starting to look like a conspiracy wall. And the flamingo? Oh, the flamingo got its own special write-up. Facial accessories not permitted on decorative objects. Grandpa didn't respond. He just gave the bird a pair of reading glasses and called it a professor. Brittany actually came back and cited it again. I hadn't seen that level of obsession since Grandpa binge-watched a Matlock during flu season. But the thing that truly sent me into orbit was when I caught Grandpa laughing, genuinely laughing, while reading the 5th notice in a row. The man was unbothered. No, scratch that. He was thriving. "I haven't seen him laugh like that since the time he torched his own snowplow," I muttered, and that was no joke. He actually poured gasoline on it, tipped his hat, and walked away like it owed him money. "What's so funny?" I finally asked, watching him chuckle like he was reading Sunday comics. He held up the latest violation, lack of HOA-approved lawn seating, and pointed to our porch swing. Apparently the swing's too inviting. Then he leaned in and whispered like he was letting me in on a state secret, "They're panicking, kiddo. You don't file this many violations unless you're scared someone's holding the ace. And we've got the whole damn deck." I looked at the fridge, at the papers fluttering like warning flags of a collapsing empire. I looked out the window at Brittany, pacing in front of her golf cart like a general who just found out her soldiers were cardboard cutouts. And I realized this wasn't siege warfare anymore. This was theater. And we were letting them build the set, rehearse the lines, and sell tickets before Grandpa brought the curtain down. The day of the HOA meeting arrived with the kind of humidity that made your clothes stick to parts of you best left unmentioned. Grandpa dressed like he was heading to a 4th of July cookout, not a bureaucratic brawl. Faded jeans, lucky fishing shirt, and his still not dead trucker hat. I, on the other hand, looked like I was going to court as both defendant and prosecution. The community center buzzed with tension. Folding chairs lined up like pews, bottled water sweating under fluorescent lights, and a cheap microphone already screeching with feedback every 10 seconds. Brittany Underwood strutted across the stage in a white blazer, so blinding it looked like she was about to sell us timeshare in purgatory. She tapped the mic and cleared her throat like she was delivering the State of the Union. "Before we begin, I'd like to address a particularly egregious case of noncompliance," she announced, voice syrupy sweet with malice. "Mr. Walter Delaney, Lot 17B. Total fines, $720,000, 0 cents. Property to be seized for the betterment of our community." Gasps rippled. Phones came out. Some whispered, "Holy crap," like they were watching live eviction TV. Grandpa stood, slow and deliberate, like he was stepping into a saloon. He carried the leather satchel casually like it was just holding his lunch. He climbed the steps, tipped his hat, and took the mic like a man who'd done this before. "I reckon we got a little misunderstanding," he said, and the entire room leaned in. Brittany rolled her eyes so hard I swear I heard a crack. "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Delaney," she snapped. "This community has rules." "Funny thing about rules," Grandpa replied, opening the satchel. "They don't mean squat if you never had the authority to write them in the first place." And then he pulled out the documents. 1, 2, 3, laid them on the table like aces in a poker game. State grants, dated 1927, signed by Governor Harold Jenkins. "This land exempt from your HOA, from your bylaws, from your nonsense." He turned to the crowd. "My grandfather bought this land before any of you ever thought pastel shutters and shrub symmetry were constitutional rights." Dead silence. Someone coughed. Brittany froze mid-blink, and then, like he'd choreographed it, Mr. Hal Dempsey rose from the back row, papers in hand, voice dry and smooth like a jazz saxophone. "These documents are authentic," he said, "filed, notarized, and legally bulletproof. The HOA has no jurisdiction over Mr. Delaney's property. Any attempt to seize it would be, in legal terms, completely bonkers." Murmurs. A woman clapped once, then stopped, unsure if she was allowed. Grandpa stepped back, arms crossed, watching Brittany like a cat watching a mouse recite its resume. But Dempsey wasn't done. "Additionally," he added, adjusting his suspenders with flair, "we've submitted a petition to open a formal inquiry into alleged financial misconduct by the current HOA president." He didn't need to say her name. All heads turned. Brittany's face did a slow-motion transformation from smug to pale to something resembling a boiling kettle left unattended. She stammered, "This is outrageous, slanderous. I run this HOA with integrity." Dempsey raised one brow. "And yet," he said, producing one last envelope from his jacket, "we've secured a preliminary hearing, signed yesterday." And then, right there in front of everyone, a man in khakis, ironically, walked up the aisle and handed Brittany a court summons. The room collectively inhaled like someone had just dropped a firecracker. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Phones recorded, neighbors whispered, HOA board members suddenly discovered a deep interest in the floor tiles. And just when you thought this woman's day couldn't get worse, bam, a court date printed in bold, handed to her on the same stage where she tried to evict an old man with long flamingos. The meeting ended, not with a bang, but with the sound of Brittany Underwood's clipboard clattering to the floor. No microphone to shout into, no army of khaki to back her up, just a court summons in one hand and a face redder than HOA-regulated brick. As she stormed out of the hall, heels clicking like angry metronomes, the crowd didn't boo. They clapped, slow at first, then louder. It wasn't for drama. It was relief. The dictatorship of decorative mulch had fallen. One board member quietly removed his HOA badge like it was radioactive. Another leaned over and whispered to Grandpa, "I'm sorry, we should have spoken up sooner." Grandpa just nodded and replied, "Better late than HOA." By the time we got home, the barricades were gone, the access-restricted signs had vanished like a bad dream, the mailbox was blissfully citation-free, the flamingo untouched, still wearing its glasses with ironic pride. Grandpa moved slower that night, not from age, but from the satisfaction that comes after a long game played well. He went to the fridge, took the latest violation notice off its magnet, and replaced it with a fresh trophy, a grainy photocopy of the front page from the Hillbrook Herald. The headline read in bold, "Queen Karen dethroned, HOA president under investigation for misconduct." The picture underneath showed Brittany mid-screen, mouth wide open like someone had just told her grass grows naturally. Grandpa tapped the photo twice. That's art. Within a week, the HOA board resigned en masse, citing everything from stress vertigo to a sudden desire to spend more time with family. Brittany's house, once the gleaming centerpiece of the neighborhood, complete with matching gnomes and a sprinkler system that could probably detect sarcasm, was dark. No lights, no clipped hedges, just overgrown grass and silence. Rumor had it she skipped town, sold the place for a loss, and moved somewhere HOA. Irony is delicious when served cold. The neighbors changed overnight. People waved again. One guy even brought us a pie, blueberries slightly burnt but heartfelt. Kids started riding their bikes freely without fear of being fined for reckless pedaling. Someone hosted a potluck, and Grandpa was asked to bring his famous chili, which, for the record, requires a legal waiver if you don't like spice. The lawn chairs came back. Unregulated, mismatched, glorious. One afternoon, as I was restacking firewood, Grandpa called me into the kitchen. He had that familiar glint again, the one that usually meant something absurd was about to happen. He held out an old manila envelope. "Found this behind the water heater. Figured it was just junk, turns out." He handed it to me. Inside, another set of documents. Older, even more faded. Land rights, not just for our property, but the wooded plot next door. Apparently his grandfather bought it for fishing access back in 1912 and never recorded it with the town. It had been absorbed into the HOA maps decades ago, assumed abandoned. I looked at Grandpa. "So wait, you're telling me we own part of the land half this neighborhood was built on?" He grinned like he'd just caught a catfish with his bare hands. "Yep. And the fun part? The HOA never had permission to build their fancy clubhouse on it." I stared at the papers, jaw halfway to the floor. I thought it was over. "It was," he said, sipping his tea. "And now it's just getting interesting again. Because sometimes you don't just win the battle, you find out the battlefield belongs to you." Grandpa laid the envelope flat on the table like he was presenting a treasure map. Inside were land deeds, so old they were type on paper the color of weak coffee, with corners crumbling like dry toast. I scanned the text, squinting at every line until one sentence stopped me cold. "Parcel 8A, wooded tract east of Lake Hollow, designated for private use only, recorded 1912 under Delaney Family Trust." I blinked. "Grandpa, that's..." He nodded before I could finish. "That's the land the HOA clubhouse is sitting on. Built their empire's throne on land we still own. Guess nobody ever read past the shrub ordinance." I sat back like the floor just tilted. "So what now? Bulldoze the place? Build a diner? Rent it to a paintball league?" Grandpa chuckled. "Nah, that's the beauty of it. We don't need to use it. Just knowing we could, that's enough. It's leverage, deterrent. Like leaving a bear trap on the front lawn with a sign that says, 'Try me.'" He tucked the papers back into the envelope and slid it into the kitchen drawer next to the duct tape and flashlight. "If they ever rise again, some fresh-faced Karen thinks she can run the neighborhood like a summer camp for narcissists, we'll be ready." He poured himself a glass of tea, then one for me, raising his as if to toast the absurdity of it all. "To paperwork," he said, "the real American muscle." I laughed, but the truth of it hit deep. HOA Karen had tried to bury us under made-up rules, but Grandpa had wielded real law like a sword. Not by yelling, not by fighting fire with fire, but by knowing what was his and refusing to bow. The neighborhood didn't just survive, it healed. Without the HOA breathing threats down our necks, people started living like neighbors again. Weekends filled with backyard barbecues and unlicensed laughter. A guy on the next street put up a trampoline without consulting a committee and no one cared. Kids chalked dragons on the sidewalk. Someone installed a hammock between two stop signs and called it the DMV escape room. And when Brittany's former house finally sold, the new owners hung a banner on the porch that read, "Now HOA free, like nature intended." Grandpa didn't gloat. He just mowed the lawn, waved to passing kids, and occasionally added a new violation to the fridge as a joke. One day it was a sticky note that said too much freedom, pending, pending. Another day, a legal level of lawn chair relaxation, $1.00, fine payable in cookies. The flamingo kept its glasses and gained a lo- That summer, we hosted the first unofficial Freedom Fest. No signups, no permits, just grilled ribs, lawn games, and a homemade trophy for most HOA traumatic story, which went to a neighbor fined for planting emotionally aggressive marigolds. Grandpa gave a short speech while holding a sparkler, said something about community, respect, and never letting rules replace reason. People clapped, some even cheered. And in that moment on a dock he built with his bare hands under a sky that didn't give a damn about mailbox colors, he handed me the envelope with the old land deed. "Your turn to hold the line," he said. "Freedom's not loud, but it is stubborn." I tucked the envelope under my arm like it was made of gold, because in a way it was. And as the sun dipped behind the trees and laughter floated across the lake, I realized we hadn't just won a fight over property lines or porch lights. We'd defended something far older, far better. The right to sit on your porch, sip sweet tea, and live free without some khaki tyrant telling you what color happiness is allowed to be. We didn't just win a battle, we protected a way of life with iced tea and paperwork. Here's what this whole wild ride taught me. Never underestimate a grandpa with tea in one hand and legal documents in the other. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't anger or noise, it's knowing your rights, staying calm, and letting entitled people dig their own graves with their own rules. In a world full of clipboard tyrants and HOA drama queens, being informed is your secret superpower. And hey, standing your ground doesn't mean screaming. It means knowing when to smile, sip your tea, and drop the truth like a mic. If this story hit home or made you laugh or cheer or double check your own mailbox rules, go ahead and smash that like button. Drop a comment with your wildest HOA moment or just say Team Grandpa if you're with us. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where justice doesn't wear khakis. Stay smart, stay salty, and always keep your paperwork.